the structure of the personal statement is now given to you. This makes it much harder to stand out. Remember, Oxbridge are less interested in your non-academic extracurriculars. 1 or 2 sentences showing your excellence outside of education is probably enough. Hi everyone, my name's Elvi. I'm an Oxford biochemistry graduate and the founder of Elvis Oxford Coach, an Oxbridge admission service specialised in bioscience subjects. Today, I'm going to explain how the personal statement structure has changed, and in light of that, how you can make your application for Oxford or Cambridge as effective and as competitive as possible. The advice I'm going to go through today applies to all subjects, but some examples I'm going to use to illustrate my points are going to be drawn from the world of biochemistry. Let's begin. So, first of all, let's actually take a look at what the new UCAS personal statement structure actually is. Essentially, it's broken down into 3 questions, okay? And these questions are essentially what you would expect. So, question 1 essentially is addressing your motivations for the subject and why you think it's important and how you kind of discovered your passion for the subject, okay? Question 2 is where things start to get a little bit different. So I think with question 2 and question 3, what they've done is they've basically made it very, very, very explicit. In the old format, which was basically just an open essay, it was kind of up to you to start talking about your various EPQs or academic competitions. Here, they make it very easy for you to do that because the whole question 2 is structured around this. And question 3 is similar, but more focused on your non-subject specific extracurriculars. For Oxford and Cambridge applications, remember, non-subject specific extracurriculars are less important. So just because you have 3 questions doesn't mean you have to talk about them in equal weight. The total amount of characters is still 4,000, okay? But you don't have to divide that into 1,300 for each of the questions. You can weight question 1 and 2 a little bit more, which is personally what I would do for Oxford and Cambridge applications. Although when we address each of the questions individually, I'll go into some circumstances where you might want to have a bit of a longer question 3. Now that we've looked at the 3 questions that make up the personal statement, I want to go through some general principles for writing an effective personal statement before we go into the specific details of what you should include and what you shouldn't include for each type of question. So I think the main thing to be aware of is that the fact that, unlike previously where it was an open essay format, now the fact that all personal statements fall under the same structure, I think it genuinely becomes a lot harder to stand out. So, for example, some UCAS personal statements I think really have stood out in the past to me simply because of the originality of their structure, their cohesion, how well they were written. Now, the fact that everyone is answering the same questions, everyone's structure is going to kind of converge. So that means that it's even more important to give unique perspectives and to talk about your academic and extracurricular and non-subject specific extracurriculars in a really unique and convincing way. And on that point, it sounds obvious, but you want to be specific, detailed, and clear. So, what do I mean by specific? If you've done an internship, you don't just say, I did an internship in a laboratory. You clarify what your role was and in what type of research you were doing it in. So it could be, for example, microbiology. It could be with an oncology lab, for example. And what do I mean by detailed? This isn't about repeating facts and information that you can just copy off the internet. It's about expanding in depth on what you did and what you learnt, why it was important to you, and how it impacted your academic journey. Linked to that, the idea of just not simply telling facts. Anyone can go on the internet and look up, for example, an economic theory and then use 3 lines to explain it. And you might think that sounds impressive because maybe it's beyond the scope of your A level or IB studies, but it's not, because it's just facts. They're not interested in facts, they're interested in your interpretation. Again, it's why did you enjoy this? What did you learn from it? How did it change your thinking? What did it lead you to do next? And so, in this way, you should be kind of almost telling a story. It's almost a one thing led to another kind of um, presentation. You want to be on this continuous journey of academic discovery. And one way to do that can be to have like a theme or an angle. So, for example, at Oxford and Cambridge, the subjects are very, very broad. For example, biology is huge. It covers everything from zoology to microbiology to genetics. So you really have to pick a few subtopics within your subject to focus on. For example, PPE. You can make an angle about how PPE is a great subject to explore human nature. So obviously we have philosophy, so that would be like ethics and ways of thinking, and then you have politics and economics, essentially about allocating resources in the society. That's one theme or angle you can take, for example, and that's much better than having loosely connected facts, ideas, events. The other thing that I really want to emphasize is that this is a personal statement. It should sound as if it's your authentic voice. At the end of this video, I'm going to go a little bit about how and whether you should use ChatGPT for developing your personal statement. But ultimately, if you've put your personal statement into ChatGPT and it sounds like a LinkedIn post, it sounds like an American businessman, you've gone really, really badly wrong. Okay? What the admissions tutors are interested in is your unique insights and why you are passionate about the subject, what you can do to contribute to the subject. Now, that doesn't mean that you go off on a tangent, your journey as a person, like your emotional journey. No, that's not relevant. That's very much a US personal statement thing. So let's begin by addressing question 1, which essentially is to do with your motivations for the subject. A great place to start with this is essentially to talk about the topic within your A level or IB studies that really sort of excited you about the subject and sent you on this journey to want to read further about the subject. Okay, so there are good ways and bad ways to talk about that. So, for example, I could say something like, I chose to study biochemistry because we learnt about protein folding, and then I go on to talk about the hydrogen bond, and then I describe what a hydrogen bond is, and then I simply say I enjoyed it. Okay, this is very, very low value because it's given that you've enjoyed it, because otherwise you wouldn't be applying for this subject. And you don't want to be just telling facts like I am here. This is, again, very uninteresting. Anyone can look this up. It's not unique to you. What would be more effective would be to say something like this. Learning protein folding at A level showed me the importance of physical chemistry in biology, and it changed my perspective on what biochemistry is, the laws of physics and chemistry applied to biological systems. Okay, this led me to discover the field of bioinformatics, and then from there I can talk about, for example, how you can have molecular dynamics simulations to predict a folded protein interacting with another protein. So in the first example, we just have facts and no interpretation. In the second example, we have interpretation and connection to new ideas, academic journey. The other thing that you want to do is your personal statement should have links to the bigger picture. What do I mean by this? It's essentially Where does your subject fit in the world? By contributing to the research and knowledge in your subject, what advancements could be made in technology, in culture, in art, in science, in engineering? Flatter, essentially, the admissions tutors. Remember, they're experts in their field and they want to feel important. They want to feel chosen. And you can do that by reflecting on how the subject isn't just this academic bubble, it actually has an impact on the world. Um, Another way you can do that is give a hint at what kind of careers you'd like to do on your as a result of your subject. And again, like with the impact on wider society, this is effective because Oxford and Cambridge need to see evidence of big picture thinking. If you're someone who's just um, researching your subject, you're doing all your extracurricular readings, but you've not thought about why this is important, that gives the impression that you're not critically engaging with the material. You're just doing this because you think it looks good for your personal statement or for an interview, but you don't actually appreciate the subject in terms of how it can change the world, essentially. This is the kind of caliber of student, of mindset that you need to have for a successful Oxford and Cambridge application. Now let's address question 2, which is basically your subject specific extracurriculars. And I think the problem or the challenge with this question is that the way the question is written, it actually makes it too easy to complete. It's harder to stand out because it literally tells you what you have to do. How have your qualifications and studies helped you to prepare for this course or subject? And I think this is the key bit. Um, in the old personal statement, when people would talk about their extracurriculars, their subject specific extracurriculars, they wouldn't always actually link it back to the course. Now you're effectively told to. So everyone's going to be doing this. So it makes it harder for your personal statement to stand out. Now, what is the kind of content that I would focus on for this question? I would be thinking more on things like EPQs, competitions, additional academic courses. The things with EPQs is that they are a extended body of work and they can be very original and niche. For example, you could be investigating how different strains of bacteria um, affect the quality of fermented food products at different temperatures. That's very niche. That's very specific. Um, Other things that are obviously very good to talk about are academic competitions and maybe linking that to building on existing curriculum knowledge and learning new things, but then also linking it to discipline, teamwork, and problem solving, which are obviously very important for scientific subjects. Um, for additional academic courses, that would be things like, for example, a statistics course that you may have done online or a programming course that you may have done online. Obviously, these are very general skills that can help in a range of subjects from economics to physics to psychology to biology. Okay, so things like these are great. Where I do think you should be careful is just simply saying, well, I'm prepared for this physics course because I studied mechanics at A level. Yes, you and everyone else who's applying for physics. It's not unique, it's not interesting. I think the better content is in your EPQs, your extended essays, competitions, and additional academic courses. Just talking extensively about your subject and what you've done is not going to be that high value. And you're already going to have done a little bit of that in your question 1, where you talk about why this subject. Well, obviously you studied it at A level and IB, and that's how you discovered it. And so you can talk a little bit about the link between your A level subject and how it impacted your further research around the topic in question 1, rather. Taking a look at the final question, question 3, this is where you focus on your non-subject specific extracurriculars and essentially any other details that don't quite fit. I'll explain a little bit more about that at the end. But basically here, as I mentioned, this section doesn't have to be that long. right? Remember, Oxford and Cambridge, the focus is on academic extracurriculars. You can use the space, the characters for this question on question 2. Of course, all of the questions, they do have a minimum character count, that is 350. But again, you do not have to make this as long as question 2. Now, what do you need to be showing with your non-subject specific extracurriculars? You need to be showing excellence, leadership, dedication, creation, organization. Just talking about, for example, volunteering at a youth center as a general sort of assistant is not high impact. It's great, but it's not high impact. So, what kind of things qualify under excellence, leadership, dedication, creation, etc.? So, great content would be, for example, if you've created a blog page where you have a weekly publication analyzing newly released literature. And then you talk about, for example, how that is a demonstration of your commitment to journalistic practices and also demonstrates how you're open minded and will be ready to explore new texts that you're going to encounter at university, right? That's something that someone who's studying English literature could write. Okay. It's got creation, and it's again linked back to the skills that are relevant for your subject. Similarly, if you're going to be talking about sports, we want to be prioritizing things where you are a leader. So, for example, being the captain of a team and then mentioning the level of competition that you participated at, and again, how this might link to your university life. So, for example, Oxford and Cambridge, we have the college system, and the college system is actually very competitive in terms of sports and activities. So, mentioning that you want to continue this commitment to excellence, leadership, sporting life, and bring that to the college, that's you positioning yourself as like an asset to the university. So this is the kinds of things that you want to be talking about. So yes, the idea is that you link your activities to the transferable skills that are relevant to your subject, not just listing the activities for the activity's sake. Now, the last point that I want to make is that if you have a non-traditional route to university, so for example, maybe you've taken a few years out for health reasons, maybe you've been working, maybe you're entering university in sort of your mid-20s or even your 30s. Here is where you clarify what you've been doing in that time. So, for example, work, and also you want to link this to how your new experiences have made you a better student than you would have been, let's say, for example, 2 or 3 years ago. So, question 3, if you have a sort of non-traditional route, you want to make this as long or perhaps even longer than your question 2. Otherwise, if your route is fairly conventional, and particularly for Oxford and Cambridge applications, you want to be making, I think, your question 2 a little bit longer than your question 3. Okay, 1 or 2 examples. 2 is probably the maximum of real excellence leadership in non-academic activities. I want to also address the use of ChatGPT and general AI and large language model tools. Now, obviously, you are going to be using these. It's inevitable, but really what I want to guide you on is how to use them. So, for example, how is it a useful way that we can use ChatGPT for our personal statement? Idea generation. Okay, as I mentioned, the subjects that you would apply for at Oxford and Cambridge are very broad, right? You don't have subjects like biological chemistry or physical chemistry or organic chemistry. It's just chemistry or it's just biology. This is very broad. So it can be difficult to know where to start for your extracurricular readings. And so ChatGPT can give you ideas for books to read, themes, influential speakers. All of this is perfect. Now, where is ChatGPT partially useful? Let's say you've already developed like a paragraph or two, and you're thinking this is really, really long. Okay. My question one is already at 2,500 characters. Yes, ChatGPT can help you streamline it. Okay. In terms of suggesting a shorter way to say things or just removing sentences for you. However, do be aware that it can hallucinate and it can also change your voice, your natural writing style, into sort of that generic ChatGPT type style. Where do I think that ChatGPT is not useful? Um, so let's say you've got your ideas that ChatGPT generated, the books that you want to read, and the podcasts you should be listening to, the theories you should be trying to understand. What it's not useful for is actually summarizing those for you on your behalf and interpreting them for you, and then you using that information in your personal statement. Now, why is this not useful? Because the whole idea is that it's your unique interpretation. Okay, ChatGPT can very much give you a consensus view of something, and you can probably ask it to give you a counter view, but they're not interested in that, and it'll be very obvious from how you've written it that that's what you've done. They're interested in your view, and they're interested in how, for example, how you've interpreted one piece of information. How does that change your previous perspective? How does that link to the other things you've talked about in your personal statement? This is where I think ChatGPT and similar tools will fall short. And more importantly, will you be actually able to defend yourself in an interview if you haven't actually engaged with the material yourself? And remember, writing your personal statement should be fun. These are things that you should be passionate about. So why are you outsourcing the job to a large language model? You should not feel like you're wasting time by reading around your subject. It should be enjoyable. And if it's not, maybe you're not reading about the right things within your subject, or you haven't even chosen the right subject for you. What would be the best way to approach this? I think the best way ultimately is to get a teacher or an admissions coach to review your personal statement. Why? Because these are people who have subject specific experience and can tell you if you're talking about your subject in a precise way that is relevant for your application. Okay? ChatGPT is not going to have that specific knowledge about what is relevant to your subject and what is not. Okay? So you're definitely going to be using ChatGPT, and I would recommend that you do, but wisely. So, hopefully, that was a useful roundup for all of you. I hope you've taken some value from this video. If you would like personalized one-to-one support with any aspect of the personal statement development process, be that the real beginnings, like what subject should I choose? Should I go to Oxford or Cambridge? What about the colleges? Whether it's idea generation and helping you to develop your EPQ and review it, or whether it's developing your personal statement from scratch, or just applying the final touches to it, giving it that scientific and technical review, you can find me at www.elvisoxfordcoach.com. You can book a free consultation with me, and we can discuss what you need and put together basically a personalized plan for you to help you maximize the success of your application. I'm going to leave all my contact details in the description box. And as always, thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more videos about the Oxford and Cambridge application process. I'm going to be doing future videos more focused on biochemistry and related subjects. Thanks very much. Bye bye.